What I'm going to talk to you about today is the ECAR's major study on the state of e-learning in higher education. And when I use the acronym ECAR, how many people know what that stands for? Well, you know just by looking at the slide, but how many people know about EDUCAUSE and what we do? Okay, a considerable number. We're the ones who maintain the .edu domain, and we primarily serve IT leaders in decision-making efforts. And so most of our research is geared toward that area of helping in that decision-making. And I work for the research arm of EDUCAUSE, which is ECAR, the EDUCAUSE Center for Analysis and Research. And so this is one of our major studies that we did last year, and I'm going to be presenting the results from that study along with sort of a mishmash of results from the student study that also help inform us about the current state of e-learning. So the report on e-learning, and I'll provide you with the links for that on the last slide today, which will be online, so no need to take any notes on this unless you're one of those people who likes to take notes, and in fact it's cognitively better to take notes. Have you read that result recently that rather than taking notes on your iPad or notepad or notebook even, it's much better to write down notes, much better for memory later on, or to just sit and listen attentively and form your own thoughts in your head based on the material rather than copying notes down into your notebook. Not the best for memory. Anyway, I'm getting off on tangents already. So we did a survey of more than 300 EDUCAUSE member institutions and a number of focus groups on e-learning as well, which consisted of all sorts of professionals and IT leaders who worked in the field of e-learning. We also have a number of campus snapshots on our study hub online that you might be interested in checking out, so what different institutions are doing individually with e-learning. And we also have a maturity index, which I'm going to talk about at the end of this presentation. And that maturity, all these materials are free online, available to you to check out. And so this has been one of our most popular reports in the last year or so, and so I encourage you to go online and see what we have in this area. So it turns out that nearly everybody's interested in e-learning at this point. There are only 2% of institutions that report that they have little or no interest in e-learning initiatives. And so e-learning initiatives are largely ubiquitous. And let me define for you a little bit what I mean by e-learning, because I think that's important. When I talk about e-learning, I'm really referring to courses that have either a majority or are entirely online focused. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about e-learning. I'm not just talking about the courses that have a little technology involved. We're talking about courses that are mostly or entirely online. And there are a number of benefits that institutions report from their e-learning initiatives. One is that it can increase enrollment. E-learning initiatives can increase growth. They can increase access, particularly for different types of students, post-traditional students, or geographically dispersed students who wouldn't otherwise have access to college courses. It provides another source of revenue for an institution, or it can do that. Might take a couple of years for that to be realized, but it can do that after initial investment. And it also may enhance an institution's reputation to offer a number of online courses or programs. In addition, e-learning initiatives can streamline the curricula, particularly in an era when we have a premium on physical space on campuses, and how many people do not have that problem. Online initiatives can help you streamline curricula, condense programs, provide better collaboration across disciplines, that sort of thing. Benefits for faculty and students include, of course, more flexibility. Many online courses have much more flexibility in terms of the times that they're offered. improved and revitalized teaching, and this comes as a surprise to some, probably not to you, that e-learning courses can actually improve your teaching, or teaching a course online can actually improve your teaching. There's a much more rigorous effort that goes into preparing an online course than people realize who've never done one before. How many people in here have taught online before? And so you know the amount of effort that goes into teaching the course, to preparing the syllabus, and it's usually more scrutinized than your other courses. Am I right about that? So you really have to make sure that the course content is quality content, and that you're teaching it in a quality way in an online course. And most faculty will report, and let me know if you've had a different experience. Most faculty will report that teaching an online course has improved teaching across all areas, even online courses. Has anybody had that experience or had a different experience? Great. It can also enhance the learning experience for students, and I don't think I need to go into great detail on this. You all know that using technology to enhance a course in many ways can enhance the ways that students learn and connect with material by utilizing online resources. Also has been shown to improve memory for the content, by the way. And improved time to degree. Many online programs enable fast-track programs to success, where students can complete a degree in sometimes much less time than they would otherwise. Now, this should more accurately say percentage of online courses offered by institutional type. I should correct that. But I just want you to take a look at this graph for a minute, because it tells you the percentage of online courses offered for each type of for each type of institution by Carnegie class. I'm not using my regular clicker here. For institution by Carnegie class down here at the bottom, and then here you see the different shaded areas represent the percentage of online courses offered. And here you see very few institutions are offering all courses online. But look at the type of institution that's offering a significant number of courses online. Look at those 2-year programs, those community colleges that are really at the forefront of this e-learning effort, and are the ones who are really offering a significant number of courses online, as well as for the most part, public institutions. In fact, public institutions are almost twice as likely as private institutions to offer a significant number of courses online. And that's probably because most private four-year institutions are still largely catering to those traditional students. They still have those as their niche, and there's nothing wrong with that. That may be their niche for a while to come. And we asked our participants in the study what were their primary reasons for not offering online courses. And these are the responses that we got. For the most common response offered was that their leaders have no interest in e-learning initiatives. And if you don't have that leadership investment, it's going to be really hard to get e-learning initiatives off the ground. And so if your leaders of your institution are not interested in those, that's one sign that your maturity for e-learning isn't where it should be in order to get those going. No demand among students, and that's a biggie. You'd be surprised how many people engage in e-learning initiatives without first assessing whether the students' bodies even want e-learning programs offered. So that's something that you definitely need to gauge. Faculty have no interest. You definitely need faculty to teach those courses. If they're not interested in teaching the online courses, then you're going to have a hard time getting those programs off the ground. Lack of financial resources and lack of technology was the last of the top 5 reasons for not offering online courses. Now, when it comes to managing e-learning services, what we see is that for the most part, over a third of institutions are managing e-learning services through central IT. Just through central IT, that's how they're managing them. An additional 17% have a dedicated center for e-learning that includes IT. And an additional 13% have multiple or other programs managing e-learning that include central IT. And so the takeaway message from this graph is that nearly 2/3 of institutions involve IT in some way in managing e-learning. So that's about 2/3 of institutions. So for the majority of people, central IT is involved with the management of e-learning. 40% of institutions have a dedicated e-learning center, 40%. And compare that with the 68% of community colleges that have a dedicated e-learning center. That's a huge difference. So again, those community colleges are at the forefront of these e-learning initiatives. Now, when we look at the staffing for e-learning, if you take a look at the bottom of the graph there in the dark shaded areas, that's what the current levels of staffing are for e-learning across different institution types. If you take a look at the hatched areas there, those would be the optimal level. That's what institutions desire to have in terms of e-learning staff, what they consider necessary to have in order to enhance their e-learning initiatives. The median desired percent increase in staffing is 124%. And so I think that if you take a look at the job ads that are out there now, you'll see this very much in full effect. You see a lot of people advertising for staff for e-learning at universities now. And so really there's a desire to more than double the e-learning staff in central IT. And so I think you're going to see that job market continue to have an upward trend there. And these are the staff that are needed for e-learning. If you take a look up at the upper right quadrant, you'll see that although there are some professional development staff and course designers in place, there are many more of those needed. In fact, those are the two positions that are most needed for e-learning, are those course designers and professional development staff. And notice that those two roles in particular involve direct support to faculty. Okay, so that's really what's needed for e-learning, are those types of staff. And here we show which e-learning services are insourced and which are outsourced. You can see that for the most part, these services are offered in-house at most institutions. LMS would be one exception, ePortfolio is another exception where a lot of that is outsourced, but for the most part, e-learning is done in-house at institutions. A couple of observations here is that we think that there might not be enough of institutions seeking collaboration on e-learning efforts, and institutions really have a problem in terms of maturity on e-learning. One of the biggest problems is investment in e-learning, and so there may be opportunities for collaboration on some of these services that institutions are not investigating, and so that's one of the things we're getting out there is how can we increase these collaboration efforts. Another observation for this graph is that if you notice at the bottom there, there's a little bit of a disconnect between what institutions offer and what students say they want. If you take a look at the student study, students say they want more gaming, more simulations for e-learning, and you can see that not many institutions are offering those. Now, my next question on that would be, just because students say they want it, does that mean that we should be giving it to them, right? And so you really have to look at whether these gaming and simulations are actually enhancing their learning experience, and you see research efforts underway to answer that question directly. Did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, the graph before you said professional
I'm not sure how I would define it. That's exactly how it was stated in the survey. So that's what I'm reporting to you, is that they're stating that they need professional development staff. And for the most part, I think what we're talking about here is professional development for faculty directly, in terms of providing them with the training needed for them to teach online courses. And so that's how I would define it, but I will tell you that in the survey we left it up to those individuals to define that for themselves. So you might want to interpret the results with that in mind. All right, so when we look at how e-learning services are distributed, we see that most e-learning services are centralized. Over 90% of institutions provide an LMS, tech support, and a course delivery system. And the majority provide those most popular services centrally. And in fact, what our respondents told us is that it makes the most sense to provide any services that involve students a great deal centrally, and that usually involves the IT. And it really depends on the purpose of the service. If the service is really a generalized function, it makes sense to centralize it. However, if the purpose is innovation, if you're testing out a new e-learning service, sometimes testing it out at the distributed level is more ideal for innovative types of services that you're offering. And we asked our participants what were the most important factors in the selection of e-learning technologies and solutions. And we see that number one was reliability, that the services have to be reliable. Second was the security of student data, that was very important. And I just did a report on governance, risk, and compliance, and can tell you that that is at the forefront of a lot of institutions' minds, is that data security. The ease of use for faculty and students was third. Effectiveness was fourth. Contribution to learning objectives, ease of integration, and cost came in finally here as an important factor in selecting e-learning technologies and solutions. And, I should say, finally, specific features and functionality. Now I have inserted here a separate section on MOOCs, because MOOCs are really a specialized offering for e-learning. So I just want to talk briefly about MOOCs. But first, I'd like to get a sense from you, where do you think MOOCs are headed? What is the future of MOOCs in your mind? Anybody want to offer an opinion? Yeah. Self-directed learning. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good response. Partnering, collaboration to provide credit for MOOCs. Yes, I agree with that. Good observation. Anything else that's in the future for MOOCs? Yes. Right, supplementation for a course, or a way of enhancing efforts that are already underway. I like those responses, and it tells me that this audience is relatively sophisticated in your knowledge of MOOCs and where they're headed in terms of your responses here. Yeah.
I also think with the aging boomers, you're going to see an enormous number of retirees.
Oh, I think that's a very good observation. Yes, with more and more people living to older and older ages, they're you know, these are individuals who are going to have less cognitive decline in the past, and are going to want to continue their learning efforts, or are going to want to continue that quality of life that they've enjoyed. And I think that's a good observation as well. So none of this is going to come as any surprise to you guys, but I don't know if you remember all the hype that was surrounding MOOCs in 2013. It was dubbed by many media outlets. Somebody laughs at that. I laugh at that too. The year of the MOOC supposedly was 2013, and I call it the year of MOOC hype because I don't think it quite met the descriptions that were offered it. You saw a lot of words like tsunami, revolution, disruption, and transformation in articles that had to do with MOOCs. A lot of talk about MOOCs in 2013. When I did a Google Scholar search for scholarly articles related to MOOCs, I noticed that in the 3 years and including 2013, preceding and including 2013, a ton of articles on MOOCs, and that included words like this. Now, when I looked at the scholarly articles for 2014, what I saw were a lot of articles about doubts about MOOCs, that MOOCs were a mixed bag, and that MOOCs were basically a failure. And so I think we've gone sort of the opposite direction in 2013. Well, MOOCs did not live up to all of the hype that they had promised, but there's probably still a reason why MOOCs are out there, and so we'll discuss that a little bit. MOOCs are primarily offered by large and doctoral institutions. If you take a look at the graph here, you can see that it really is remarkable in terms of the difference. If you look at institutions with an enrollment of over 15,000, or if you look at doctoral institutions, so many more of those institutions are offering MOOCs than any other type of institution. And so these really are still under the purview of these large and doctoral institutions. And if you're feeling like your institution is behind in your MOOC efforts, you probably are not. There aren't a whole lot of people offering MOOCs. And even if you look at these large and doctoral institutions, the majority of them aren't offering MOOCs either. If you look at projections, future plans to offer MOOCs, yes, we do get to where most doctoral institutions, or a majority, are looking to offer MOOCs, but I'm sure that figure has not been realized, and probably won't be realized for a while because they're just not living up to what they were expected to do. Why do you think that is? Why are MOOCs not living up to what they were hyped to be? Yeah.
I think people were expecting them somehow to disrupt education.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they got looking at what kind of return on their investment, and also how are they going to be able to afford to pay for MOOCs if with that current model. I just don't think they begin to realize it's not going to happen the way they thought.
Right. MOOCs did not know what they were in for, right, when they came up against higher education and the long traditions of higher education. I don't think that that people saw that coming. And you see a lot of people who initially, or companies who initially offered MOOCs that have actually been shutting down because they haven't seen that return on investment, as you stated. Yes.
I think all the people spinning the hype were overly optimistic, thinking that schools were going to get credit for everything that was delivered.
Right.
That credit was just not.
That's right. Yes. And why do you think that people are not giving credit for MOOCs?
Well, I don't know that's obviously a much bigger discussion, right? But I don't know that it's always in the best interest of the institution to be able to, give that education away for free and then also certify and validate that you've received the same level of education that you get if you were on campus. So there's definitely a concern with eroding away the credibility of the institution.
Exactly, and you got at my point very quickly. There was never a plan in place for a business model for MOOCs, and there still is not a plan in place for a business model for MOOCs. There's no clear way in terms of how we integrate MOOCs into the higher education system as is, and still make a profit. And regardless of our nonprofit status that most institutions maintain, we still need to get the money from somewhere to offer these courses. Yeah.
But the problem for the MOOC is that you can get the same credentialization
Right.
They're still going to have to take the test, they're still going to have to prove it, but just taking the MOOC piece is sufficient in and of itself.
That's right. That's a very good observation. So when we look at why institutions do not offer MOOCs, we can see here that the top reason here is the unclear, the unproven business model, no demand for MOOCs among students. And again, I will say that was not anticipated either. You know, there's expected to be this rush to MOOCs on the part of students, and we just have not seen that happening, particularly with our traditional students. Leaders having no interest in MOOCs, lack of financial resources, faculty having no interest. MOOCs may be a fad, but really? We asked that of people last year when we gave them the survey. MOOCs are for others. Why institutions do offer MOOCs? Well, a lot of them were offering them just to explore this new method of offering courses. And so you saw the large and doctoral institutions primarily getting on board because they do have the resources to explore new methods, to build their overall reputation, to attract more and different types of students, appeal to leadership interest, invest in alternative revenue, which hasn't quite met their expectations, to build reputation in specific areas, the greater good, to share knowledge, to appeal to faculty interest, to showcase star faculty. And that really has been one of the realizations of MOOCs that people did not anticipate as well. Appeal to alumni interest, and to attract faculty to their institution because of those other reasons. So, although MOOCs got more hype, the broader topic of online learning has greater interest in the higher education community. When we look at the institutions that are delivering either online or MOOCs, we see 80% of institutions delivering some online courses. And to me, that's huge. That's a major factor in terms of how e-learning has progressed. But then when you look at MOOCs, only 5%. Okay. When you look at the percentage of undergraduates taking online learning courses as opposed to MOOCs, almost half of undergraduate students report taking at least one online course in the past year, or mostly online course, whereas only 3% have taken a MOOC. In terms of institutional leaders' interests, take a look at how this figure compares with the other two reality figures. Okay, you look at leadership interests, and look how much higher for MOOCs in particular. Look how much higher the institutional leaders' interest is in terms of percentage for MOOCs than in terms of undergraduates taking or institutions delivering on those. Look at how out of proportion that is, and that's because of that MOOC hype, right? I think it can only be attributed to that. So in our student study in ECAR, we asked students, what's a MOOC? We asked them, and this is the largest undergraduate technology study of its kind. What's a MOOC? Nearly 3 in 4 undergraduate students have never even heard of a MOOC. So this is not even on their radar. This is not something that they think about. In fact, 4 out of 5 MOOC students have already graduated from college. 4 out of 5. MOOC takers tend to be haves rather than have-nots, so people with resources. Remember, initially, MOOCs were touted as the solution to students not being able to afford an education. So these were supposed to be marketed to students who did not have a lot of money. But it turns out just the opposite is true. The students taking MOOCs are the ones who do have resources, who do have money. They tend to be males rather than females. They tend to be older rather than younger. And don't be insulted because I put over 30 as being older. From abroad rather than from the US. So more people abroad take MOOCs than do people in this country. Currently employed rather than new job seekers. They tend to be fun and curiosity seekers rather than purposeful. So most people taking MOOCs are taking MOOCs for the fun of it. And I think that's interesting. And they tend to be more of an opportunist for some professional development in their current job rather than seeking skills to get a new job. So those tend to be the makeup that is a profile of a typical MOOC student. Any comments or questions before I go on to the next section? Yes. That's right. MOOCs. That's right, and there's much more of a concern about accreditation for e-learning initiatives, which hopefully I will have time to get to in this presentation. But yeah, you're absolutely right. MOOCs are basically appealing to what we're calling post-traditional learners. So learners who are outside of that traditional age group for college and outside the traditional demographic for that, not even really seeking degrees. And that's who MOOCs tend to appeal to. And so really the business model you'll see the business model evolving toward that type of student for MOOCs. I'm not sure how much longer they can remain open and sustain that business model. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is, but most of those are not undergraduates. Most of those are not the individuals that we're thinking of as taking MOOCs to get a degree or the ones to whom the MOOCs were marketed in the first place.
But if in fact you work out the credentialing problem, that may increase. And also, to underestimate the importance, the social importance of people having access to lifelong learning.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think that what people are missing the boat on here is in terms of really extending that whole mission of the university to folks other than the ones they're traditionally educating. And I think that's where MOOCs have the place. I think you're really right about that. So let's look a little bit at some concerns and challenges regarding e-learning in general, getting off the topic of MOOCs now. We asked people what their concerns were about their e-learning initiatives at their institutions, and this is what we found. And you can see here the shaded areas represent moderate concern and, moderate concern here in the green, dark green would be a major concern. And so these are listed in order of at least a moderate concern. The technological know-how of faculty tends to be a primary concern for e-learning initiative offerings. Adequacy of the staff. So again, coming back to that staffing issue, the number of staff you have on hand. The ability to keep up with others, and that's a huge pressure in higher education, is keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with those institutions that are matches to the demographic you're targeting. That's a big thing. Affordability, adequacy of the technology, faculty skepticism, that continues to be a concern among individuals. Return on investment, adequacy of the policies surrounding e-learning, and accountability and accreditation issues. And then notice here that on the bottom, this was one that we asked, and we're kind of surprised that it turned up last, the transformation of higher education for the worse. It seems initially when we were offering online courses, there was a huge concern that we were really making higher education worse with a lot of online offerings. And we can see here that, at least with our subject population, who do tend to be IT folks, that really isn't a major concern of theirs, that we're transforming higher ed for the worse. And I think that is probably a decreasing concern among the general population as well. However, many still view e-learning as disruptive, and many people view disruption as being negative, although we're getting a lot more popular and positive press on disruption now. If you look at the articles on IT, we notice that a lot of people are writing about how disruption can be a positive thing in higher education. And so I'm glad to see those articles out there. And this disruption may be what is needed to overturn former business models and to serve post-traditional learners, as the point that was mentioned earlier. In higher ed fashion, though, this will likely be a gradual adoption of more online courses. And I think that's just fine. Still some cultural challenges for e-learning. Faculty skepticism and reluctance to participate are still viewed as barriers at many institutions. How many people have a problem with this at your institution, that you still have large faculty resistance to courses? And I'm seeing a few hands raised, but not nearly as many hands raised as when I would talk about this topic a year ago. A year ago, about half the people in audiences would raise their hands in response to that question. So that's good to see. Some faculty will still question the quality of online courses. Some do not want to take the time to learn new technology. And I think it's important to address faculty skepticism and reasons for it at your institution before embarking on or expanding e-learning initiatives, because you do have to make those investments in e-learning for it to continue, and you don't want to make the investment unless you have what is in place for e-learning. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. I do have lots of suggestions for getting faculty on board with e-learning. I'm not going to have time to go into all of those for this presentation, but if you want to catch me afterward, I can offer you some suggestions if you're still having problems in that area. I'm a former faculty member myself, so I know what it's like to be pressured to put technology in your courses when you just don't have the time to do it. So, yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right about that. And faculty are seeing other people around them teaching online courses, and nothing really bad is happening to them. So they're probably seeing that. In fact, they're being recognized for it. They're being given awards for it. They're being given incentives for teaching more online courses, and they're seeing this. When they see that, and those would be some of my suggestions, when they see that happening around them, they're going to be more likely to adopt at least a more positive attitude, if not want to teach an online course themselves. Financial challenges. So there's a perceived danger of e-learning being viewed as a cash cow. Pushing enrollment limits for e-learning is sometimes seen as hindering pedagogy efforts, and or sometimes blurring the line between nonprofit and for-profit colleges. Sometimes people view e-learning cash cow efforts for that, because if you look at leadership interest in e-learning, for the most part, what you see them saying is it's going to bring us in more money, it's going to bring in more revenue. And so many times that's what faculty are seeing as well. They're saying, hey, we need to really take a look at the quality of what we're offering and what it's doing for student learning, rather than just how much money it's making us. And so you're getting this push-pull there. Technology and fees. E-learning involves new business models. How much are you going to charge for courses? Should you charge as much as for face-to-face courses? Since sometimes once you get e-learning initiatives off the ground, online courses are actually cost less to offer than face-to-face courses. And who gets the money? Who gets the money from these online courses in terms of percentage going to department heads, percentage going to the e-learning center? You know, who gets the percentage of profits from these courses? Quantitative challenges. E-learning initiatives facilitate large data collection, and that brings up a whole topic of analytics, which I don't really have time to delve into in great detail for this presentation. But I will just say that EDUCAUSE has a whole wealth of resources on analytics and getting started in analytics. I just did a workshop about a month ago on getting started with analytics. So if you really want to know what your institution should do with your big data efforts and analytics efforts, check out the EDUCAUSE resources. They're free to you. Qualitative challenges, again, new business models that are still emerging, and I'm going to return to one of my original points that institutions need to consider partnering and outsourcing for some of these services in order to be able to afford it. No single model emerges as the best model. And to this point about accreditation concerns, a lot of people are concerned about getting online courses accredited. One of the things I did for this e-learning report was to actually interview several accreditation agencies. And so I asked them a series of questions. You know, what does it take to get an online course accredited? How do you view online courses? A lot of people have the perception that accrediting bodies really frown upon online courses, or that they're going to have a hard time getting them accredited. And to a person, each and every president, accrediting body president who I talked to in these interviews said, we do not scrutinize online courses with a different lens. We have the same criteria for online courses that we do any other course. The only thing we have to be sure of is that they're meeting federal guidelines for online courses, because it's the federal guidelines that differ for online and face-to-face courses. And really the only thing that differs there is that when you start offering e-learning initiatives, you need to get special accreditation for those. And then when you start offering more than 50% e-learning initiatives, you need to get special accreditation for those programs or offerings. So really those are the only things that differ. And so the onus is still on the institution, just as it is with face-to-face courses. The onus is on the institution to provide evidence that those courses meet the same standards. Okay, so they do not differ. Now, I want to finish up by talking a little bit about e-learning maturity, because this was a major focus of our study, was looking at what institutions need to have in place before either embarking on e-learning programs or courses, or enhancing those programs or courses. And so I developed a maturity index from a number of questions on the survey and did a factor analysis of those, and came up with 7 factors of e-learning maturity that we'll talk about in turn here. Overall, we measure maturity on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the most mature, 1 being the least mature. And so the overall score on these 7 factors for the institutions that we tested on this e-learning maturity index was 3.6. And you can see you can see here on each of the spokes, you can see the scores for each one of these. And I'm going to go in decreasing order for overall scores when I talk about each of these maturity factors. The first is the synergy of e-learning systems, and these are the items that make up the synergy factor. First of all, what we found is that for e-learning initiatives to be successful, most of the services need to be centralized. And so we look at whether institutions have that. And you can see here that most people do. You can see that most consider e-learning critical, or their IT departments consider e-learning critical. That's very important. And most have reliable technology. And so this is the factor on which most institutions are fairly mature, is synergy. Then we have priority placed on e-learning. So whether the institutions view e-learning as a strategic priority, view e-learning as an investment, and whether they have management positions for e-learning. That's also an important maturity factor. And so if you go online to the Study Hub, and again, I'll provide you with this link, you can actually take the maturity index. You can get your own individual score on the maturity index for your institution or for your department if you want to measure it at the department level. And you can compare your scores to these on here. Readiness. Is faculty interest on the rise at your institution for e-learning courses? Do faculty determine the technology used? Also important for e-learning maturity. Are you allowing the faculty to have a part in the decision-making process for the technology you're using? Or are you just saying, here, you need to use this technology to teach your courses. This is what we're offering. You need to make them part of the decision-making process. Is e-learning scalable, and are e-learning services adaptable at your institution? Those are the other items on that factor. For ongoing technology evaluation and training, do you have faculty training in place? Many institutions still do not. They're trying to offer online courses without offering any training to their faculty in terms of how to teach those courses, and faculty are having to learn themselves. Is new technology regularly evaluated? Do you have staff training in place and student training in place for e-learning? Although we assume that students come into our institutions already tech savvy, they don't necessarily have the skills to apply to even an LMS, to even the LMS, let alone to taking an online course. So we need to make sure our students know how to do this. And as you can see, the majority do not. Policies and governance. You need specific policies and governance in place for e-learning initiatives that you don't necessarily need for face-to-face courses. Do you have security technology in place? Do you have policies for intellectual property of course material that gets distributed online? Policies for decision making, for ID verification. How do you know the student taking your course is the student, for example? E-learning governance. E-learning technology being made accessible to students with disabilities. Notice the poor percentage of institutions who are making sure that that is in place.
Is there any breakdown
Yeah.
as to what security technologies?
No, this was a general item. So in other of our studies, we really break down that component into its pieces. But for this study, it was a generally asked question. Investment in faculty and staff. So is e-learning support straining your IT department? That's important. That's an indication that you need more staff. And are faculty rewarded for online courses? And look at the relatively low percentages there for that factor. Institutions are not doing great on that investment factor. Yeah.
In terms of the e-learning support for the institution or the school, are there specific kind of areas where you recommend that they focus? I mean, these are large institutions, but I'm at one school in a large university, so I'm wondering what you think we specifically need to support that school.
Oh, that's a good question, but it's an incredibly complex question in terms of what you need individually to support e-learning. And I can tell you, we have a lot of information on e-learning infrastructure and what you need, and not something that could be answered in a single question. It would depend on what you already have. It would depend on collaboration efforts you already have in place, or whether you're just starting from scratch. If you're starting from scratch, I would suggest you start right here with our maturity index. Look to see what you already have in place and what you need to enhance, and that will be your starting point. And again, it's free. You can't beat free. You go on and you can see here exactly what you need in terms of support. In terms of outcomes assessment, look at the low percentage of institutions that have analytics to evaluate their strategic progress in their e-learning initiatives. They don't even know whether their e-learning initiatives are working because they're not measuring it. They're not measuring their success in the programs that they have invested heavily in. Look at the low percentage of the institutions that have sufficient analytics to evaluate their courses even. So that is not good news. Analytics efforts are still woefully behind in higher education institutions. And I did an analytics study a few years ago and continue to deliver workshops and presentations on analytics and still find that a lot of institutions are behind. We also have an analytics maturity index on the EDUCAUSE Analytics Study Hub. So if you take a look at that, you can also assess your institution's progress in analytics. And it will also offer suggestions for how to improve your efforts in those areas, as does the e-learning maturity index. So these are the links that you will find online if you were to look up this presentation, and you can go right to the studies that I've been referring to here, as well as get access to the maturity indices that I've talked about. And we really hope at EDUCAUSE that this is a resource to you because this is why we do this, is to provide this service to you, to let you know what you need to engage in these efforts. Any final questions for me? We have time for a few questions. Yeah. Yeah, well, you'll find it online for the agenda for this conference. I'll be posting it online. I'll do that later this afternoon. And so just go online and look for this presentation, and you'll be able to have the links right there. And I see people taking their photographs, so they'll have the links as well. Did I have another question in the back? Yeah.
As a faculty member, what is your opinion on who owns the IP that goes into standing up an e-learning course? Would it be the faculty or the institution or a combination of both?
Well, I think that as with face-to-face courses, we take a look at those, and we see in the past that it's really kind of a mixture of both. When you're looking at that intellectual property, faculty aren't prohibited from taking that content and taking that to another course with them, another institution with them. So we haven't had policies in the past that have prevented faculty from doing that, and they're generating a lot of the content for their courses and continue to do so for online courses, although that's a much more collaborative effort for online courses. So I don't see the need for not continuing that model. I haven't been offered a good argument for not continuing the model, that it's a mixture of both. There would be no reason the institution couldn't continue to offer that online course taught by a different person than that faculty member, and there shouldn't be a reason as well for the faculty member not to take that course with them to another institution. Although, as I'm thinking about it, maybe you would have different property concerns with the video associated with that course for an online course, or especially if it was produced at the institution, right? So you might have some property concerns associated with that. And what's most important, though, is that you have a policy behind that, and everybody understands that policy from the outset. So that's why it's important to have good IT governance in place to get those policies in place. I think that's a very good point. Yeah. Oh yeah, that is key as well, and I think that's also an important thing to consider when you look at what's already in place. Did you know that only about 13% of institutions have 24/7 help desk support? Only about 13%, and yet 80% are offering online courses. And so you look at that disparity and you have to wonder, are they really doing their best to support those online courses? Do they have the resources to do so? How do you offer online courses and not provide 24/7 help desk support? That's a real disconnect for me. So I think that's also a good point to bring up. Yeah.
There are a few companies out there that actually offer that online classroom support for you that have experience across multiple LMSs, and they just generically call themselves online support. So that way, you can spend $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year to get 24/7 support, which doesn't even cover the fraction of the cost of one additional person. So definitely look at outsourcing some of that.
What a great point. What a great point. Again, yeah, consider outsourcing, consider partnering with other people to get some of those services administered. Okay, great talking to you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming today.